Look at these smiling faces in spite of the fact there was frost on your windshields. Well, some of you maybe haven't been out to scrape the frost off your windshields, but you're certainly going to have to. Scott actually had to this morning.
Well, it's one of those mornings I said, Greg, that I can get away. You can get away with a couple of toots of the water.
Yeah.
You're still give it another week or so and a couple of weeks and there'll be scraper time, I'm sure.
Well, it's Wednesday morning, of course, Chamber Chat as usual from 9 to 10. This week we have a very special guest, Scott Bridger, who is moving on actually as of tomorrow. And we wanted to sit down and give you an opportunity to ask some questions of Scott, chime in as well, but more importantly, talk about Scott's 22 years, a lifetime of work at the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, and some of the things that, well, we were just chatting a few minutes ago, and I could tell you, we were laughing most of the time we were chatting about what we're going to talk about, because there were a ton of funny things that happened, and that happens in a small not-for-profit or organization that, you don't have all of the resources that you actually need. So sometimes we have to wing it, and I've always said that it's smoke and mirrors, and in a lot of cases that's what it's been over the years, and Scott's been part of all of it for the last 22 years. But Scott,
yes,
first I want to talk about the fact that 22 years is a long time. Like very few people stay at their employer for 22 years,
right.
But before that, you had a life that kind of brought you to the Chamber of Commerce, made you understand. Why don't you talk about some of the members you worked for prior to coming to the Chamber?
Well, for those of you who don't know, I before a couple of things. I mean, I went to school here at Conestoga, graduate there, great supporter of the Chamber, of course, and got to know a lot of people there. John Tibbetts was, the head honcho then, I think, when I went there then. But anyway, it was when I got out of the college, I really liked the area. I lived in a small town, grew up in Toronto, but lived in a small town west of Stratford called Mitchell. For those that knew it, I went to high school there. Ended up going to Conestoga College. Did a co-op term there at the old Kitchener Y. The old downtown Y, that where residents and everything used to stay, quite a spot. Did that for a couple of years, did some things, but at one point ended up, because I took recreation, I ended up at Bingaman's for about 14 years. Jonas Bingaman, Lawrence Bingaman, some amazing people. I met Brian Banks, who I think might be on this call. I don't know. Oh, there's Brian. How you doing, Brian? Saw Brian the other day picking up his mailer. Thank you. Yeah, it was Bingaman's was incredible, but it's actually where I got my first introduction to the Chamber. Not this Chamber, of course, but I think it was, I'm trying to think of it. Yeah, it was both chambers at that time. They had amalgamated. So I actually started to get involved in the Chamber as a rep from Bingaman's, started to get involved a little bit more, and actually got involved in some committees there, and started to really meet people from the region at that time. And I met a woman by the name of Anne Gray, that we used to call her Anne Gray. I don't know why. But anyway, she said to me at one point, I was maybe looking for a change at that point, and she said that she was doing some work. She'd been hired to do some work at the Cambridge Chamber because they were going to be building a brand new building and visitor center, and inadvertently talked to me, and I said, well, maybe I would be interested in, they needed somebody for sales. There hadn't been there. There'd been a recent change in the CEO. A woman by the name of Nancy Lucier was there at the time, who had come in from the Fergus Chamber, I believe. She had just started. So anyway, I started that process, had a couple of interviews, and next thing I know, I started there. And I remember they hadn't had a salesperson for a while. It was certainly our chamber now is obviously one of the best in the country, but at the time, I remember the office manager came in on my first day and handed me quite a pile of those little memo messages, little pink ones, you know.
Yep.
tore up. Quite a pile. And she says, "Oh, here's some people who have called about joining the chamber." So I'm like, "Well, great. Hey, I'm starting off with some leads in my day one." So I remember that. I'll never forget this. I called the first person and I said, "Hey, it's Scott Bridger calling from Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. I'm just getting back to you." He said, "Guy, I left that message 3 months ago." So anyway, but it was a good start. I wish I could remember the very first membership I sold. I was trying to think that the last couple of days, but so that kind of got me started. Of course, we were at the Allen Rever Center there, and my office was right beside the jail cell, and we had some great staff in there at that time, and Freddie Tusa and Charlene Oldham, and lots of different people at the time. So it was fun. We tourism was being run out of there. Lisa Haddo was there at the time, and a few other people. And of course, but as we got there, our main focus started to become the building of this building and the visitor center. And for those of you who don't know, I actually started before Greg, just by a few votes. I'll leave that story for Greg to tell when he's
about March 20.
20th. I was right at because I remember I left my job and I took the week off before I started, and my ex at the time and my 2 kids, I did a drive down to Disney World, I think, in Florida.
Okay,
I'm gonna take a week off.
I remember you talking.
Drive down there and then come in Monday and fresh at the chamber, and here I am almost 22 years later. Actually,
it was funny because I got hired back in December of 2020, so 10 months later or so. And I can remember, I think actually I started here at the chamber on December the 11th. And of course, Ann Gray, wonderful person, but not very attentive to details. She cleaned off the computer, cleaned out her desk, and then said, "There you go, Greg, I'm off on a 2-week cruise," and left the building. And so I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I said, "Well, where's Scott? Like, Scott, he's the sales guy. Where's Scott? I should meet Scott." "Oh, Scott's having surgery." Do you remember that?
Yes. Yep.
And I think we had a telephone conversation, maybe a week later or something like that before, because you didn't get back into the saddle again until probably early January. But those were like certainly memorable days, because my job at that point was, we were trying to build this building, and your job was trying to fund the ability to stay in the building, and we had a lot of fun. But I want to go back just a little bit, because a lot of people out there won't know, but you grew up in Mitchell. And you have a strong connection to a very famous individual. Why don't you tell us who that is?
I don't know who you're asking.
Your Elton John connection.
Oh, yes. Mr. Furnish, who is married to, this was actually before Mitchell in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
So my best friend growing up was John Furnish, who is the brother of the husband of Elton John. So I used to go up to their cottage and everything. And I remember, God, this is being taped. I could hear this coming back and haunting me. But Elton John's husband, John Furnish's younger brother, was about 4 or 5 years old. And we decided, we lived on the same street, which is called Charlemont, Wishingwell, Agincourt area of Toronto at the time. And so we decided, all the kids got together, and we're going to have a talent show one night. And so we got John's younger brother to, he was about 4, I think. And we got him to his talent was going to be standing up. We invited all the parents and everything in this. We were in one of the guys' backyards.
Very cool,
And we told him that his talent was going to be standing up and saying all the bad words he knew. True story. So he gets standing up there, and all the parents are there, and he starts saying bad words. And I mean bad words, swearing and everything. And I remember his mom.
And he's like 4 or 5 years old.
4. We were about 8. And his mom came up and stormed up and grabbed him and hauled him out of the backyard and everything. True story. It's funny.
Oh, boy, some of the things, but I didn't hear that story, but I certainly heard the story. I can remember when the announcement came out that David Furnish was, I think it was David.
Yeah,
Furnish,
David.
he,
It's a young brother.
they were getting married, and then you said, oh, yeah, I grew up with his brother. What? Like, you know, that kind of stuff just
Yeah.
doesn't happen. It's kind of.
Yeah, there's
interesting.
actually from that area, from that high school, from that area. I mean, John Candy, Mike Myers,
Yeah.
kind of grew up in that area as well.
Yeah.
Never had, I think one of them went to the high school I went to, but my dad worked for 32 years at IBM on Don Mills in Toronto and took an early retirement and bought 2 old schoolhouses up in the Mitchell area. I was just coming out of, just going into high school. And he bought 2 schoolhouses and he sold his house in Toronto. He'd roll over right now knowing what he sold that for then.
Yeah.
What it'd be worth now, I'm sure. But so anyway, we went up to Mitchell. My dad did quite a bit of work on them and we lived there, and I lived in a schoolhouse all through high school. And it's funny, I occasionally run into people from that era quite because a lot of people from that area did end up in the Waterloo region.
Yeah, Art Sinclair.
Art Sinclair and
Yeah.
we ran into each other we run into each other quite often, but we ended up pulling up a couple of bar stools in, we were in Fredericton at the convention and sat there and closed the place and just had a laugh
Yeah.
talking about high school, because Art was in the same.
Yeah.
set. I think he was 1 year younger than me, but we kind of chummed around. a little
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting how sometimes, your association with individuals as you grew up, all of a sudden there they are in your business life and
Yeah.
and in your business life, being in the chamber network, you're gonna run into
bit. Oh,
all kinds of people because
Definitely.
it's our clientele really is so broad. I want to talk about the real early days. So you get hired in March of 2000. The chamber's embarking on building this building. In fact, I think it wasn't until the summer that the board actually made the decision that they were going to forge forward, because it was already in the works. The plans were already done. Nancy Lucier, who was the general manager of the chamber at the time, was going on maternity.
yeah, it
leave.
just got hired and then
Yeah.
announced a maternity leave.
Yeah, and then she had decided later on that she wasn't going to come back. Anne Gray was really doing fundraising around the gateway, the
Yeah.
building. And they got her to take the interim role as general manager,
Yeah.
which she didn't want to do because she wanted to concentrate on doing the fundraising. But
Yeah.
those early days when, really, the only thing you had to sell was kind of memberships, you must have been thinking, holy smokes, like this is going to be, because our membership rates are exactly the
Yeah,
same
exactly
today
the
as they were
same.
then.
And that's right. They had barely touched on any sort of sponsorship at that time.
Yeah.
It was truly just memberships. But also at that time, as we were preparing to go into the gateway, we started with tourism partners.
Right.
So I expanded more into the tourism industry, which of course I had a lot of contacts coming from the Binghams.
Binghams,
coming
right,
from
yeah.
Binghams, Jeff Eisenbrough at the Holiday
Yeah.
Inn and all kinds of different people that were in the tourism. And
Karen O'Grady from
yeah.
African Lions
Yeah,
Safari at
yeah.
the time.
And tourism, you always say it, Greg, our area doesn't have sand and, ocean views and palm trees, but there's lots of stuff going on and it's a passionate group and it
Yeah.
was. So, we, at that time, because it was, the primary focus was the chamber, but really the building was really like the visitor center and with the tourism, the gateway to
Yeah.
the Waterloo region tourism. So, that opened up, we had, I was getting, because we had the visitor center we were going to have in the 401, and that's a story too.
Yeah.
Putting that sign up.
We'll talk about that. 'Cause that was
Yeah,
hilarious.
But I mean, we got interest. So we, at that time, we had, people signing up from tourism, from like, Woodbine,
Yeah.
Niagara Falls, tourism, all kinds of stuff because they wanted to.
OLG started to come on.
Yeah. Well, Woodbine, Woodbine and Mohawk, all the casinos joined because, they wanted that exposure in the visitor center because really we were the only visitor center, till Montreal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We were the only one on the 401
Yeah.
between Windsor and the Quebec border.
Yeah.
And it was, I guess we didn't really kind of know at that time, you and I were both new to the chamber. Oh, we're building this, gateway building. Yeah, that's kind of cool. And then you came to me just after you got back from your surgery and you're starting to get going. And it was kind of in the spring, and we're talking about the gateway opening in 2001, June 16th actually was our official day. And you said, well, we should take our newsletter, our Spectrum newsletter, which at the time was like a 3-fold 8.5 by 11 newsletter.
Yeah.
Right. And you said we should do a magazine and we can sell some ads and we can generate some revenue that way. But more importantly, we can talk about the building of the gateway.
Mhm.
And so, of course, I'm picking out carpet and paint colors and, working with the contractor. I just said,
Working
okay,
with
Scott.
bakers.
Yeah, working with bakers for the furniture and,
Yeah.
and I'm pulling my hair out and I just said, yeah, Scott, okay, that's fine. So here in your archives is the very first, and I'll put this up so everybody can kind of see it. That's the very first magazine style of Spectrum. That actually was Scott's idea. I think it was just to sell ads at the beginning, but it certainly turned the page as to what we were going to do as a chamber organization. So have a look at that and look at some of the faces on that front cover who are no longer with us, actually,
No.
some of them.
No, there's lots of Sam Purdy there, and God, look how young you were, guy. The one shot there is all the people. I remember that day. I remember I got a call from the gentleman at the time who owned the Swiss Chalet in town.
Yep.
And he said to me, I'd like to give away some quarter chicken dinners. And I said, well, what do you want to do? Give us some door prizes or something like that. He says, no, I want to give everybody one. I said, well, we're expecting like 1,000+ people here. He said, hey, that's okay. And he did it.
Unbelievable.
He would come up in a carloads that day because it was a one-day open house. We did a business one the night before, and I think a couple of days later on a Saturday we did the grand opening to the community. And it was, but this gentleman, and he did it, and he'd come up with these free quarter chicken dinners. And it's funny because Lisa asked me what I wanted today, having a few people for my last luncheon. What did I say? Swiss Chalet.
Swiss Chalet.
But he would come up in a car and they would be just packed with the quarter chicken dinners and those little foam things. And, people would literally surround the vehicle and, and then you give them away and they drive away and go get another couple of hundred and come back. But it went like that all day. And I thought, man, that was unbelievable that they did that. But,
Yeah. It's kind of, because I think it surprised both of us going along, how the business community rallied around the Chamber of Commerce, and a lot of it had to do with, us touching base with businesses and keeping in contact and being kind of that, and I see it now, we're going through a bit of a strategic plan, and we had some focus groups, and one of the comments that were kind of over and over and over was that the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce feels like warm and comfortable.
Mhm.
And I think that's why businesses really tend to support the Chamber of Commerce, because we make them feel comfortable, warm and welcome.
Right.
And a lot of that, was kind of the fun that we had in building this organization.
Yeah.
We never took it really too seriously.
No, and I continue to hear that people who have been members in other chambers, and I'm not, being disrespectful in any way. But I've had many people who have maybe come in from other communities over the years, moved here, worker personally, and ended up joining the chamber, and have always said that they've always felt so very welcome and friendly and fun. And you know, it doesn't cost much to give a warm handshake and a you know, smile. So that's what we did.
No, I think that's, you know, certainly what you always brought. I don't think you, other than maybe away on vacations, you never missed an event. You were always there to talk to your, you know, the members that you had dealt with, and give them that handshake and warm smile, which I think is really important. I just want to mention before I forget about it, that maybe my most memorable moments with you, Scott, was, and I can't even remember what year it was, but it was a painstaking 11-hour train ride that I went with you to Quebec City. You thought it would be brilliant to support VIA because, and Greg, let's take the train to the Canadian Chamber Conference.
Yeah.
And, you know, it really wasn't until we got on the train that I realized this is going to be 11 hours with Scott Bridger sitting directly across from me with, what did you have at that point?
Bro, I had a toe, I had some surgery on my toe and it was all bandaged up.
And then we had this layover of about 2 hours or so in Montreal, and you had to hobble along on this, you know, walking.
We were downtown,
path.
yeah. But that time we went to that conference, we also had to park because we were flying back. We only took it one way. So we had to park at Pearson, take, you know, at that time there was no tram, you know, running down in downtown.
No.
So we had to, I think we just took a cab or, you know, limo, one of those sort of things, down to Union Station. So, I mean, that whole process, you know, by the time we pulled into Quebec City.
With your walking.
And I'll never forget.
We went via one because we had the passes for VIA.
Yeah. And we got in there, we got into the hotel and we said, I'm going down to the bar. It was getting late. We're going down for a drink, and who was in there but Ian Smith and his wife.
Yeah, I remember
Sat
that.
around and
Absolutely.
talked with them for a couple hours. So Ian Smith, a good chamber.
And I think
guy.
that was your first Canadian Chamber Conference.
Might have been.
And as luck would have it, because our flight was like a day and a half after the conference, I think. What we didn't know about when we went down there was that simultaneously, right after the Canadian Chamber, was the World Chamber Congress was happening with people from around the world.
The only time ever in Canada.
Yes, that's correct. And so right away, you and I said, we're going to be here anyway. We need to go to the World Chamber Congress. And I remember going down into old Quebec City with the president and CEO of the Santiago Chamber of Commerce from
Dominican
Republic. And I remember what I
got all close with the guy.
Yeah, I know. And you asked him the most popular question you ask every single chamber person. Have you ever had anybody quit because they didn't get any value out of the chamber? And what did he say?
All of them.
Exactly. And maybe that's kind of, you know, that's kind of another memory from my perspective is when someone would leave the chamber, and that is always the excuse. Generally speaking, you know, I guess used to kind of get a little bit frustrated with that and say, well, like, you know, we can't like come and pick you up and hold your hand into the event. You gotta participate.
Like a gym membership.
Exactly.
And that still holds as true now as it right now, and will in 20 years probably, as it did.
What happens if you regularly go to the gym? You get into better shape, you feel better, you're better for it, right? Same thing with the chamber membership.
The other thing I remember, and I hadn't, but it was the first time when we were at that World Chamber Conference, because I had.
Who spoke?
That's what I was going to say, and still might be today.
Yeah.
The favorite speech I've ever seen in all the years, and it was John Chrétien.
Yeah.
Opened up that World Chamber Conference at I think it was a Civilization Museum or something across into Hall. Maybe, I'm not sure. I forget, but I think it was. But I don't know whether it was coming up on an election time or in and around that time. But man, he was, I remember you and I came out and I remember, we always used to grade
Yeah.
the speakers
Yeah.
all the time at different events. But Gretchen was just the most fiery, passionate speaker that I still to this day maybe have ever heard.
Yeah.
And that speech that day, because he was speaking to delegates from, I think, 97 countries.
Yeah.
Something like that, all over the world. And he just fired one, and it was unbelievable.
I remember when we went into that hall, because we're going there for the Prime Minister's speech, and I happened to sit down, and right next to me was the president CEO of the Paris Chamber of
Yeah.
Commerce. And he said, "Hi, how are you? Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I'm from Canada, Cambridge, Ontario." And he said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Where are you from?" He says, "Oh, I'm from Paris, France." And I said, "Oh, very nice." I said, "How many members do you have?" He said, "Somewhere around 250,000.
Yeah.
He says, and then he says, "How many members do you have?" And I thought, I just said to him, less than that.
Yeah, but it was, in a lot of the countries, it's, you start a business, you're a member of the chamber.
Yeah.
It's, you're in there. So.
Yeah, what have you got very involved with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce Executives Program. In fact, you were president of CCEC for Canada. You were actually the first non-CEO staff member to be the president of that organization. But you attended numerous Canadian Chamber conferences and OCC.
Not as much, but
not as much, but a few OCC ones. What would you say was the most important thing you learned from those relationships?
Well, certainly the opportunity to steal ideas.
Yeah.
And that's, we always laugh about that because you're in a whole different community. It's easy
Yeah.
to, pick ideas, but I think that the scope of the people that I have met, we've had the opportunity, or I've had the opportunity with you to go literally coast to coast, to Vancouver to the Rock. And actually the year I was president, I was in St. John, and then we had some monumental evenings there with Mr. McLean down in KW at the
memorable
nights on George Street, kissing the cod and all that stuff. And of course, I think Artie Sinkler was there. And but yeah, I think, met so many amazing people going to those conferences. And I forget how I first got involved, but I just, got involved on a committee at the side with the chamber executives and just kind of grew from there. And a woman by the name of Shelley Morris, who has run the CCEC, I think since I started going, then still there. It was hard to say no. And it just kind of kept moving along and, got on the executive and had the opportunity. And the other thing that was a real thrill for me was the year that I was president of the CCEC. You did get to go, you did get a seat for that 1 year on the Canadian Chamber Board of Directors, right. Which I did. And I got to go to Vancouver and a couple of other spots, Montreal, I think, for their meetings and sit in there. And, I'm sitting around a boardroom table, the sales guy in Cambridge, and there's, presidents of huge companies all sitting around. They're like, "What do you think, Scott?" I don't, it was, the opportunity to meet those people, across the country and everything. Of course, I have the utmost respect for Perrin Beatty.
Well, you got to know him.
Yeah, got to know Perrin quite well on those conventions, and he's, when I do see him, if I do now, he would always have a friendly word and a chat about that. So
some great experiences and some great conversations. I think I don't know of another business type industry where you can have that camaraderie, because there's no competition, right? There's it's not like there are 3 other chambers in Cambridge that we're trying to fight with. There's only one. And so the network is very strong and very connected. And I think that's what you fell in love with over the last.
No,
22
no
years.
doubt. And the other thing was, and I was, when I was, thinking about it the other day, I can't remember exactly who it was, but I was always able to, when I met with someone, and I was thinking about, selling memberships over the years, and I remember walking out of one, and I think I might even have come back and told you, I walked out of one place attempting to sell a membership. And I remember walking out and getting in my car and going, I don't think I'm calling him back. There wasn't anything I could seem to help with, but that was the only one out of
Thousands.
that I met with. I was thinking of a funny story. I remember I probably sold 20 memberships down at the food court, Cambridge Mall, because we would always,
Yeah.
go to their store or their retail outlet or their restaurant, and they wouldn't really have any room there to sit down. So we'd go down for a coffee or whatever. And I remember going down to sell a membership. Might have been one of the first ones I ever sold at the mall. And it was called Laura Secord. The store. I might still be there. I know the one in the Burlington Mall is still going, so it's still going. So I was driving down to the mall, and for the life of me, I couldn't. And I was really good with names. And I'm driving down. I hadn't written her name down, and I was like racking my brain to remember what her name was. That was running the place. So I went into the mall and, knew where the Laura Secord store was. And I walked into the front, and there was a young lady there, buying the ice cream thing or something. She said, can you help? Can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'm here from the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. My name's Scott Bridger, and I'm here to meet with, and I said, Laura Secord. I don't know why I said that. It just blew out, and I thought, oh God, Scott, they were stupid. So the young lady kind of looked at me like, Laura Secord's dead, isn't she? But so anyway, I ended up saying the manager. Anyway, her and I went down to the food court, had a coffee, and without a word of a lie, I walked her back. She signed up. I had the membership in my hand, and I walked her back to the store, and I left, and I turned around, and for, again, some unknown reason, I said, thanks for your support and joining, Laura. True story.
You were amazing with names. I remember we used to play that game every once in a while where, for whatever reason, I'd have a membership list or something, and I would name the business, and you would tell me who the contact person is at the business, like, or name a person, a contact, and you would name the business that they're in. It was amazing.
Yeah, and I think it was, I tried to keep in touch with, I still do try and keep in touch with, as many people. It's harder now. There's certainly a lot, our membership's that much bigger, but, it's been, I've had, so many opportunities to meet so many people in so many environments. I mean, I don't know how many times I've, sat at, their dining room table, and in small businesses, picnic tables in the backyard, everything you can imagine. I sold I sold memberships, in every location. I had some funny stories too about selling memberships, and one of my favorites is the time I got the phone call too, and I won't mention the name of the business, but it's not here anymore, but I got a call from the business. I'll explain what the business was, but it was a place where women danced, and sometimes men. So the place is. So I got a call thinking of joining the chamber, wanted to go on the Gateway TV sign, and I'm right away, flags are flying up about that one for me. So I went down to the location and in the morning, and front door was locked, so I went around the back, and it was like a big metal door there, and had a little buzzer beside it, and it said, ring for assistance or whatever. So I pushed the little button, and this little flap opens up behind the door, where the eyes, and say, yeah. I said, yeah, it's Scott Bridger here from the chamber. I have a meeting. And then I hear clink, 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 locks. Door opens. I go in. I actually sat in the, right in the place. and never been there before. And so, you know, good time, great talk, was looking, I think ended up joining and getting involved in our group plan and all kinds of stuff, but really wanted to go on the road sign and say that they had a free 12 o'clock noon free lunch buffet daily. And I'm like, okay, I gave him the specs, he sends the ad later, and needless to say, the ad never went never went up. It stayed a member for a number of years. And,
Oh, yeah. Well, I think in reality, it was kind of, I remember that. I think it was the group benefits program that they really wanted for their full-time staff, not for the part-time staff. But yeah, for sure. I think the whole duration of them being in business at Cambridge, at that point, they stayed with them.
And you're talking about it, Greg. I mean, that is the beauty of the chamber. There is, you know, for anybody that's, you know, if you're selling widgets in Cambridge or any place, you go to people who buy widgets. But the chamber, anybody. I mean, and it's been amazing to see. I look at the wall up behind you there of the presidents, you know, that we've had, and you know, that's what it's really all about. You know, some great names, great community leaders up there that have that. You know, I hope that there's people, and I hope there's people on the call today that can say, geez, you know what? When I think back, my business has been very successful because of my involvement with the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce.
We had a couple of businesses at the time that you know, actually did testimonials that said, you know, it wasn't for the chamber, they would have had a difficult time, and most of them because they worked it, right? They worked the networking and they did the things they needed to do.
And you know, we lived you know, tumultuous times in some of that because you know we went through some heavy duty recessions,
9/11, SARS,
9/11, SARS. You know, nothing bigger than what we're still experiencing now. And still resilient.
Recessions. I think a
couple of recessions for sure. And you know, we would, you know, lose members, and you know, would be. But you know, a lot of them came back. I did have. I was thinking about all the memberships that I sold. There's been a couple of people. I have one chap in particular. Again, I won't mention the name, but I think he was a member 7 times. And I used to say to him, "Guy, the tallest freestanding structure in Cambridge is your pile of T4 slips." You'd get a laugh out of that.
Oh yeah, for sure. We've had some great speakers. There's no question about it. In fact, if I go way back, when we were still over at King Street in Preston, we had one speaker that was kind of our go-to speaker, and actually a pretty
decent speaker,
famous Canadian.
Yeah.
But we could always call on him if our speaker didn't turn up.
Yeah, and it was the events person at the time that had some connection there, and it was the jockey Sandy Hawley.
Yeah.
I think we had him about 3 or 4 times over the span of a couple of years. But he's still just amazing stories. And because he used to, when he was living down in LA in the winter times, because he would do racing down there at, you know, one of the tracks there. But he had some amazing stories. I mean, you know, he'd stand up in front, and I mean, he'd have the place in awe because I mean, he went golfing. He filled in golfing one day, and he actually golfed with, there's a Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr.
Yeah.
And the next, you know, he was a small man, Sandy, you know, jockeys normally are. And the next week, there was a group of them that normally played, including Sammy Davis and Dean Martin, I believe. This is what the story was. I
Frank Sinatra.
And apparently he played a couple of weeks but just filled in and then didn't come back. And apparently Dean Martin turned to the Sammy Davis and said, "Where's that short guy?"
And saying that to Sammy Davis.
Yeah.
No, that's for sure. The stories were absolutely phenomenal, but probably one of the most amazing speakers we had, because we weren't quite sure whether he'd maybe had a little too much to drink before he spoke, but you would have never known that at the podium.
Yeah.
Was right here in the spring of 2003. It was his return to the Cambridge
Before,
Chamber.
long before we were here.
Right, his
time, I
first
think.
one was January the 28th, 1970.
Wow.
And then he came back in the spring of 2003. And that was the Right Honorable John Turner. Actually, it was March 20th, 2003. I don't know about you, but he knocked my socks off because he'd been,
Yeah, meeting
know,
with
at the
Richard
bar.
Nixon and, yeah, I mean, we were a bit concerned because I remember you coming over to the office and saying, you know, John Turner has been here for the day. They've been out at Langdon Hall and, you know, John Turner liked to, you know, have a
Yep.
couple of these. And Greg said to me, he says, because it's the talk or where he was speaking, the event was at the Holiday Inn. And Greg said to me, came over to the office, he says, let's go over to the Holiday Inn and, you know, go into the lounge there and have a drink. Turner's there, Mr. Turner is there. And he kind of had a bit of an entourage with them and they had traveled around Langdon Hall. And I think it stopped at a couple of other watering holes as the afternoon dragged on. And he says, let's go see what's going on. So we went over there and we actually sat and had a drink and you could tell that you know, he had, you know, had a few and I think we were both looking at each other going, oh God, what's going to happen up there? But he, again, just polished and, you know, talked about meeting with Richard Nixon and just all kinds of amazing.
I think in
stories.
my introduction of him, I said he'd been called to the bar in the Yukon, been called to the bar in Alaska, been called to the bar in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, Alberta. And there probably hasn't been a bar he hadn't been called to.
Yeah,
And then,
many bars.
and then he came up and honestly, it was
Yeah,
not
just
a
like
note.
just like he snapped
It
into
was just phenomenal, but we've
Yeah.
had some great speakers.
Yeah.
Some people that have really, you know, set us back.
Yeah.
And said, wow, that
Yeah.
was phenomenal. And a lot of them, you know, you kind of don't know,
yeah.
right? And you as a salesperson, you're selling sponsorship, you're trying to promote that, boy, oh boy. It's so important that you get that.
Yeah,
right.
and you know, and then when you sell the sponsorships, I mean, there, you know, in the other direction, there has been some sponsorships where you kind of want to just squeak out the back door, you know, midway through the talk, but not many. Most of them are very, very good, and we've seen some unbelievable speakers over the time.
Are there any, we can't read the questions unless you can, Scott. Can you read them?
No, I can walk up there.
Here, no, you sit here because you're gonna have to maybe answer them.
All right. Excuse me.
Oh, it's just people offering good luck. Carl Kiefer, Jane Hale McDonald, and I can't go up any further. Let me just see. Are there any questions, Caitlin or Melissa?
All right, there's one, just Tracy asking how many members there are now.
Oh, what? We got up to, at one point, we got up to about 19 and change. We're probably in and around the 17 and change, 1700.
I think when I started, there was 600. For some reason, that rings a bell when I started, around 600. And then, you know, I don't know how many of them were even in good standing at the time, but it was, it's been a significant growth for sure.
We've talked about that over the years that, you know, you say, you know, we'd be climbing up the ladder, you know, we get to 1,000, we get to 1,100 or 1,200. And Scott would often say, geez, you know, like I've sold like in the last 5 years, I've sold like 3,000 memberships. How come we're not at 3,000? But you know, you have a lot of. Oh, that's the Google Home talking to us in here. But you know, there's a lot of circumstances that happen, right? People try it because they're building a business, they merge, they get a job, they move on. You know, we've had, you know, a number of companies join together. We've had some where they've had maybe 2 or 3 memberships because they've had 2 or 3 companies. And then they close one or blend it into the other. And so, you know, you always have churn. And I think what our message has always been to our industry colleagues is when you start getting up there to the 2,000, your churn, you're looking at about the very best chambers are around 90%
Yeah.
retention. So that means 10%, that's 200
Yeah,
memberships
200
a year
members.
that are falling off,
Yeah.
off the book. So, you know, your first 200 are just to break even.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think maybe you might have had the biggest year in chambers in Canada with about 420
Yeah.
members or something like
I think
that.
I think the biggest month I ever had was about 38.
Yeah.
38
38,
members.
and that, I think that was like a July or something,
Yeah.
or June,
Yeah.
like where nobody's around seemingly, but
I remember when I used to sometimes hire, or we hired some students, summer students, and I remember Greg and I had gone down to, it was when the Cambridge Chamber was working to encompass Ayr and North Dumfries as part of
Yeah.
our area, our territory, however it broke down. So we thought, you know, there's a lot of businesses in Ayr, and, you know, we didn't have very many members there. So we went down, Greg and I met with their local BIA and, you know, talked to them about, you know, how we could work together and, you know, maybe have a committee going and be part of the chamber and all that. And it was very acceptable. So I ended up hiring a student. I went down and started to kind of cultivate the area a little bit. But we hired a co-op student who was about 18, and his name was Justin. And for some reason, I called him Justin Timberlake. I have no idea why, but I just stuck, and we always called him Justin Timberlake. Little wee guy, I don't know, like Sandy Hawley size, little small guy, but just a little fireball. And he showed up. It was his first day going down to Ayr. Must have been around Canada Days before, obviously I was involved in Canada Day. But he showed up for his first day, and it was the first day going to Ayr. I had taken him down. We had introduced a few people. I had obviously taken him out on some sales calls and kind of, you know, walked him through and all that stuff. And he showed up on his first day with a great big Canada flag tie. Like, this kid's 18.
I remember.
And you know, and this tie was huge with the Canadian flag, you know, red and white, and, you know, big, wide, looked like, you know, Bozo the Clown sort of a tie. You know, I think it kind of was on like an elastic or something.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was funny. So, and I remember thinking, boy, that's a bit odd. But hey, what you got to do, guy? Anyway, the kid went down there and spent really the whole summer down there and just did a great job. A lot of those companies from Ayr are still members.
Yeah.
From that.
That was amazing. He wore that tie like, holy smokes, he wore that all.
Yeah.
He just loved, I think he loved dressing up.
Yeah, and he just you know, I think, you know, he was just a patriotic guy, and just, you know, I think he was 18 or his first year of college or something, you know, young.
Speaking of the Canadian flag, I can remember getting a phone call from the city. Elaine Downton says to me, Greg, we've got a little problem. Our Canada Day committee is falling apart. The person that was running it is leaving. You know, just wondered if you knew anybody that could maybe step in, or maybe the chamber could step in and give us a hand with Canada Day. And I thought, well, you know, our resources are thin, and, you know, it's kind of difficult for us. We're the size of community where chambers of commerce don't really run programs or events like that. Those are usually held by independent committees or the city itself. So, so I said, you know what, like, if you want, I can ask Scott in my office if he would like to help out, because, you know, he likes that kind of stuff, and he certainly likes a Canada Day thing. And then you stepped up to the plate. You said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And how long did you do it?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, I remember, I didn't really know, I mean, obviously I knew what Canada Day was, but I really wasn't familiar with, you know, with the Cambridge event. I knew it was big, and they had a parade and all that. And I met Elaine. Elaine said, let's get together for coffee. And I met her down at Tim Hortons on Eagle and King, because her office, she was in where we were at the Allen Router Center. So I went down, and she kind of went through a little bit of the history, and I said, yeah, sure, I'll give it a shot. I didn't know how long I'd stayed, but again, it became something that was very beneficial to me in my position at the chamber, because of the connections that I had, the new connections that I made. Obviously, the last couple of years were tough. I mean, you know, with COVID and you know, I hope that day can get back to where it was, you know, a few years ago and all its splendor. And, you know, it really was at the time, I believe, and was the largest single day event in the city that they ran. And you know, I think back, you know, I think about all the things I got involved in outside of the chamber, but I call it part of my chamber life.
Yeah.
I mean, 9 years as president, and I think is Julie on the call here? There she is. How you doing? Yeah, hi Julie. And you know, I spent 9 years as president of Big Brothers Big Sisters. I actually was the inaugural president of, well, co-president, I guess, of the Waterloo Regional when Big Brothers Big Sisters went regional. I sat, so what a wonderful experience that was. And again, the connections that I made, and that's the beauty of this area is that as you get involved, you just continue to bump into those people again and continue to make new, you know, clients, but friends, you know, friends as well. I mean, I sat on the Mayor's Walk for a couple of years. And what else did I do? Oh, Riverfest.
Riverfest, yeah.
I was involved with Riverfest for a few years as well. And then they ran into a couple of really bad weather years, and that was pretty much knocked them down. I remember, you know, working here when they made the decision to end Riverfest. But it was from a couple of bad years, and it really was weather. But yeah, so many connections. I was on a couple of committees at the hospital during my time here. So, you know, those connections will always be there, and they were very beneficial to me in not only in my job but in my life.
Yeah, I think it really speaks to the, you know, the work you do with the Chamber of Commerce is really community work, right? And it really connects you to the community.
Yeah.
You know, I want to give you the last, I don't know what we've got a few minutes, maybe. I think we might be a little over time, but give you a few minutes to just talk about, give you some time.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that because I thought it's not often you get the last word with Mr. DeRocher. Very rarely, actually. So I may take advantage of that just for a second. But I really wanted to thank you, Greg, for all the years and the confidence that you showed me. I mean, we've weathered a lot. You know, I mean, I think it set us up very, very well coming into the situation, moving out to here with the obstacles that came with the new building and funding and all that stuff. But I think if I have to sit back and think of the highlights, I think of it really has been this community to me. And you know, just reflecting a bit, I remember when I was working at Binghamton's in my early time, I never spent a lot of time in Cambridge. You know, I was working at Kitchener, but I mean, you know, we were an event-based place. I mean, mostly events came there, and you know, we were large, obviously, and I knew some folks. And I actually had met you back then. You may not remember. You were on city council here at the time at some event that I had gone to. But you know, the people that I have met and in Cambridge, and when I finally got down and started working in Cambridge, and then for the last 22 years, what a magnificent community. Thank you for supporting the chamber, and thank you for supporting me. I said I wouldn't break up, but anyway, that's all I can say. Thank you to everybody. It's been a wonderful experience, and I hope that we can stay in touch. Social media allows that, of course, but to stay in touch and wish each other happy birthdays and best luck, and see how people's lives are going. But let me say that the people I have met in my time at the Cambridge Chamber staff, Greg, Lisa, everybody, they mean a lot to me. They have been important people in my life, and I want to say thank you.
Well, Scott, you know what? On behalf of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce, all of our members, of course, but really the entire community, we want to thank you for the 22 years of commitment to Cambridge, because that, in fact, has been what it is a commitment to our community. And those of us who live here and, you know, grew up here are thankful for what you've contributed to making our community a better place, a more business-friendly place, but more importantly, a friendlier place, because that's what you've always displayed. You know, you're always bubbly, friendly, you're good, up for a joke, you're up for a good time. And I think, you know, we are better for your 22 years here than had you not spent them here. So I'm so thankful for Ann Gray at twisting your arm and getting you over here. And our friendship over the last 22 years has been really, really important. You know, when we started off with the Gateway, and I can remember, you know, saying to you, have you got any ideas? Because, you know, we bit off a little bit more than we could chew.
Funding's running a little short.
Things are getting a little sparse.
It's $1 million building.
Yeah, and you know, and your ideas along the way, and your help, and your devotion and dedication, you know, you just don't always find that in people. And
Thank you.
and I think what makes me most proud of everything is the fact that, and for those of you who don't know and are on the call, the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce is really proud of being able to put our tentacles out and help other chambers of commerce. We have developed programs, we piloted programs, we've done all kinds of things that have gone right across, not just across the country, but around the world in chambers, in the chamber movement, because that's kind of what we are. We're you know, we're belt and suspender kind of people. We don't take any chances, but we go out there and risk it all. And I think what makes me most proud is the fact that you still got a little steam left in the engine, and you're going to go down and hopefully change the course for the Burlington Chamber of Commerce and make them a chamber of commerce to envy around the world too, because I think I love that. I love when when the Cambridge Chamber can kind of put a stamp somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, in making the decision, I mean, obviously I live there now and have lived there, and I've grown to love the community there as a place to live. I've never worked there, obviously. But I hope that I can just bring some things to them that will help them. They've had a couple of tough years with COVID, as have a lot of chambers. You know, fortunately, our chamber, yes, it's been tough, but I mean, you look at the programs that you guys have done with, you know, the test kits and during COVID. I mean, it's been second to none. Chambers are astounded by the kits going out here every day. People don't, you know, we have quite a list of people, you know, and whoever comes on after, when someone says, I'm not going to renew my membership, you know, it's like, well, what about that 2,000 kits you picked up? Yeah. You know, when we were wearing masks and all that stuff, you know, remember that?
Yeah.
But you know, it makes me proud, and I hope that I know I got lots in the engine left to go. I look forward to helping them and bringing some. You know, I guess I only hope, because I haven't really gotten to know the community of Burlington outside of, you know, some friends and neighbors that I have there, but I'm not working there and not being entrenched in the community. I plan to get involved in the community. I plan to maybe get involved in some boards. I look forward to it. And I just hope that they are just half as receptive as the people that have been to me in this great community.
Well, here's to another 22 years in the chamber industry.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
It's been great.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you, folks.
Thank you.
Have a great Wednesday. Don't forget to send Scott your notices. He's here till tomorrow, and it's Scott@cambridgechamber.com.